Hello, everyone. This is Brooke Rouse from the St. Lawrence County Chamber. Thank you so much for joining us today on the first Wednesday of June. I just wanted to do a couple housekeeping things. I believe your mics are all muted, but if not, you can go ahead and do that. I wanted to point out that there is a question and answer box there. At any time, if you have any questions, large or small, please don't hesitate to ask questions. Jen will stop throughout the presentation and take those questions, and we'll also have time at the end of the presentation to do that. You'll also note on the main presentation screen on the top right, there's a little box with 4 arrows. If you want to make your screen full screen, you can click on that box and see everything a little bit larger. I also want to note that the session is being recorded and will be available on slcchamber.org. We have an archive of all of our past webinars there and have had hundreds of people watch those at their own convenience. So please visit slcchamber.org and check out the webinar archive for lots of wonderful information that's been presented by our St. Lawrence County Chamber of Commerce members. I also wanted to point out there is a feedback form on the front on the original screen that we'll have show up at the end of the presentation as well. We really appreciate your feedback on this presentation, as well as providing some ideas for topics that might be of interest in the future. And we are always looking for people with not even necessarily expertise, but some knowledge in a particular area that you think might be beneficial to other business owners. We're thrilled to have our local businesses presenting these topics. It's always nice to learn from people you know or can get to know. So we're going to get started. There are still some people logging in, but they'll join us. We do try to keep this to 1 hour lunch hour and have you all back to work at 1 p.m. I want to thank Laura Perry at Clarkson University, who is our partner in hosting this webinar and making the recordings available. We really appreciate our partnership with them and want to thank St. Lawrence University for being a sponsor for this educational series. Again, feel free to ask questions throughout the presentation. We will stop and get to those throughout as well as at the end. I'm very happy today to introduce our presenter. Many of you may know her. Jennifer McCluskey is the owner and photographer for McCluskey Photography in Canton, New York. She's been in business as a professional photographer since 2009 and works with a wide range of clients from weddings and families to commercial, architecture, and business. Jennifer offers individual and group classes to help people improve their photography skills and has developed a series of free educational videos. She also works as a business advisor at the SUNY Canton Small Business Development Center and is one of our wonderful members who often photographs our events as well. So thank you to Jennifer, and take it away.
Well, thank you guys for having me here. Good to see you all attending. I know quite a few of you, but nice to see some new names on the list. Again, my name's Jennifer McCluskey. I'm going to be talking to you today about how to improve your product photography. I was interested to see the results of the poll. It looks like we've got a lot of large product people, so I was thinking there'd be a lot of jewelers today, so we'll kind of mix and match a little bit. As I'm sure you guys know, having good photography is so important for your sales. With social media, with your websites, you've got to have good images to really promote your brand and to get out there. So I'm glad you're listening today. My goal is to kind of show you how you can improve your photography without having to spend a lot of money, and how to improve even just basic lighting skills so you can get better pictures of your or images of your products to be able to sell better, because we definitely want to get the economy going up here and sell as much as we can. So I do want to touch in just briefly on how to operate your camera. I'm not going to dig into that too much today, because that's a whole webinar on itself. I do have some videos on my website, on my blog. I also can do in-person trainings if you want me to come out and help you do that on your own. So there's really 3 things that come together in your camera to make that image, to make that exposure. The first thing is the aperture. It's a big word. All that is the hole in your lens that lets light into your image. And then there's the shutter that clicks up and down in the back. Some cameras now and phones, it's electronic, it just turns on and off. And then there's what's called ISO. That's the sensitivity of the sensor in your camera or phone to light. So these three things combine to take that picture. If you're really happy with the pictures that are coming out of your camera, if you're in auto mode and it's working for you, that's great. Don't really stress out about learning about all these different things. But if you are running into some issues with sharpness, with blurriness, I can kind of go through what might be happening. So if you notice that the image is blurry all over the place, like there's nowhere in there that's clear, that's likely a shutter speed issue, meaning that the camera or the phone or you are moving between that time that shutter opens and closes. So there's a little bit of blur within the image. The way you could fix that is a tripod or putting your camera or phone on a solid surface if you're not able to afford to get a tripod. I'm definitely going for starving artist level here. I'm trying to see like minimal equipment that you guys will need. So if you put it on a tripod or put the camera on a stable surface, it'll help so that shutter you can get some clearer images so you don't have that movement happening between where your shutter is. If you notice on your picture that part of it's clear but part of it's fuzzy, that's likely an aperture issue. I'm going to flip to the next slide real quick so you can see a picture of what I'm talking about. So on this bowl on the left, you can see, let me move this mouse in here. There we go. On the front there, it's really clear, but back here it's blurry. That's something called depth of field. And when your aperture the hole in your camera is open, wide open to let a lot of light in, you do get this blur right here in the background. And then one piece of it will be clear. Now this might actually be something you want. The blur in the background or the blur in the foreground can really emphasize your subject. I saw a lot of you were large subject people. If you wanted to emphasize, like I think, say Amanda out there's got a solar cell and she wants to look at one cell, she could focus on that one cell and kind of blur out the background and foreground, and that could pop out. But if you do have a product, like you're working with jewelry or something where you need to see both the back and the front of it, you will want to make that aperture smaller in your camera. So how to do that? You can control it manually. Some cameras will let you actually pick what the aperture is. Or if there's an A on your camera, that usually means aperture priority, you can pick to change your aperture there. Or P in program mode, you can change it there too. Or your camera might have, like you'll have a little face on it or some little mountains. If you want a bigger aperture like this bowl over here, go with those mountains. That'll make things clearer in the foreground and background. This will make your shutter open for longer, so you'll definitely want to have a tripod when you do that. So aperture and shutter speed are the main things that might cause some blur in your image. The third thing might be ISO. What that is that's that sensitivity to light. If you notice grain in your image, basically like little dots, especially in the dark spots, that could be because the ISO is too high. So either you're going to need to change your shutter speed so you get more light in there, or you're going to need to add more light, like get closer to a window or bring in a lamp or something to get more light going. So those are some of the very quick, I know it might be a little complicated overview of basic camera operations, but again, I can go through this more a little later. And if you do have questions, please type them in on the right and we can touch on some of them a little bit. And then one more general tip to decrease distortion. If you notice that your image is somewhat like this on the here, yep, on the left, where the lines just are not quite straight, it's angled a little bit. Our eyes used to dealing with that, so you still see it as square, but it's really not as square as you need. Especially if you're an artist, you're taking a picture of your art, you really want to have those lines be straight. So the way that I work with that is that you want to make sure to have the camera parallel to the subject. So to get these square lines over here, I actually stood up above that picture and took it straight down. So if you tilt the camera in any way, it's going to create these sort of line distortions. Another way to make sure that you don't have those distorted lines is if you zoom in as far as possible. So a wide angle lens or wide angle camera will create more distortion. A zoomed in, a telephoto lens will create less. You won't have quite that issue. So I do a lot of real estate photography, and again, I saw there were quite a few that do larger subjects. With real estate photography, I definitely use my wide angle lens a lot. And I'm sometimes looking up at a house, so there is going to be a little bit of that distortion that's created by the lens. One of the great things is there is image editing software out there that can let you fix that. Usually it's pretty easy with one click. I'll be talking about different free options versus Photoshop in a little bit. So if you are getting that distortion and it's really unavoidable with the subject you have, know that it is fixable post-processing. So those are just some general topics that can help you if you're doing any kind of photography. So I didn't know if any of you had any questions. I'll pause for a second and give you a chance to mull it over and think if you have anything. And Brooke, did you see anything popping in?
No questions at this time, but reminder, definitely put your questions in if you have them.
Okay, well, hopefully you're learning a little bit. So the next slide, I kind of wanted to find out what people's goal is. Like, what sort of photography what are you looking to do with your photographs? And there should be a poll that pops up. There it goes. So I'll give you a few minutes to say if you want to sell your photos on eBay, you're just wanting like basic pictures, or if you're looking for more creative stuff. Okay, it looks like we've got a lot of people wanting to be creative, which is great. I definitely love that. So I'm going to show you a little bit about how to set up your home for a home studio for smaller products. So briefly, for those of you that do need to have products to post on eBay, you'll just want to light your product pretty evenly and have a small enough aperture that no part of the product is blurry. So you want to deal with that depth of field issue we talked about earlier. You might want to have a permanent setup so it's easy to get in and out if you are going to do a lot of small product photography. And then we'll get into how to improve your creative products. So I've got a little video here. This is going to show you, this is my living area. I do have a studio at my home, but I know none of the rest of you probably do. So I kind of wanted to show you how you could set up a studio in your home pretty quickly and easily to just take advantage of the window light. So Laura, if you want to roll that video, I think she's going to switch screens on you. Yeah, here we go. First, you got to take the furniture out. And then I use I like velvet as a background. It doesn't wrinkle, so you don't have to worry about those wrinkles. That's just a piece of fabric from Joann that I hung over the door there with some clamps. That's my favorite IKEA table. You can get that for $10 at IKEA. They have a black one and a white one. I like to use that a lot for product photography. I tried to use the clamp there to get the wrinkles out, but I didn't need it. And so all you need to do is have a window there. And you don't even have to have a window that's that big. If you've got a smaller window, that'll work out fine. So really, for smaller product photography, all you need to have is a window. There's definitely more stuff you can get that'll make your life easier, but a window, a backdrop, and something to put your product on. If you can get it close into that window, then it works. And I'll show you, we're back to the slideshow now, so I can show you some of the product pictures I got from that window light. They look really, really nice. I've got, do have some blur in the background. I was showing you a little more depth of field this way. It's also a good idea when you're taking pictures to try changing your angle. You might get something a little different if you go up or you get lower down. So many people come at a subject and they just take the picture standing up from about 5 feet high. So people get used to seeing that kind of look. So if you get lower down, it can give you a more dramatic look. Or if you get up above, you can sometimes see different lines and things happening. So definitely play around with your positioning as you set something up in the light. If you've got a good setup there, move around it and see how things look. You might get something really creative out of that. So I'm going to get into how to remove glare and control shadows. People do ask me about that a lot. Like they've got a shadow in their image they want to fix, or they're photographing some product and you keep getting this shiny light on the top of it. So we'll get into that in just a second. If you just want to have light fall only on your subject, like if you've got a piece of jewelry or something that you don't want to show the background, you just want this bright light just making it pop and be all colorful and creative. It's pretty easy to do that. It's technically called a gobo, go-between. What you can do, all you need is a piece of cardboard or something like a big piece of paper, and just poke a hole through it. And you can hold that up in front of a window to get a beam of light coming through. So that can be a way to kind of decrease that background, add a little more creativity or pop to your image. The trick there is if finding you might have to have somebody else with you to hold it up, or you might have to get a stand to hold it just in the right place so it beams that light right onto your image where you want it. On the other side, if you want to evenly light your subject and there's shadows and you can't really get rid of those from the window that you're going on. And as a side note, actually, you might want some shadows in your image. Shadows a lot of times add depth, especially if you're photographing something with texture. If you side light it, that texture will really pop out because the light kind of catches that. If you've got a flash coming off your camera, it's going to decrease that depth in your image because you're not going to have any shadows. So I do try to encourage people when they can to turn that flash off on their camera because that kind of just wipes everything out and washes it out. So having light coming in from the side is great. If you do want to get rid of some of the shadows that you're having, you can use a reflector. I've got pictures over here. This one is your basic photography reflector. You can buy one of these on like Amazon or on a photography website. Or if you want to go slightly poor man's version, you can use one of these like the car reflectors. I think you can get those pretty much any sort of car store. These actually fold out and they're stiff, so they kind of can stand on their own, and you can get a stand to put behind one, or that you can just kind of lean it on something. But basically you put it on the far side of the light to reflect the light back on your subject. And you can kind of flip it around too and just see how the light's reflecting back and just get that light where you want it and then get it to stand there. If I like to think of it, I like what I call a light sandwich. I like to have light coming in from one side and the opposite side with my product in the middle, kind of being sandwiched in that light. I think it makes for a beautiful shot if you can get light coming from both sides. Can really clear up your image and make it brighter too by adding a little more light, and then you don't have to deal with aperture as much. So here's one of my, I'll show you how to deal a little bit with glare and shadows. I am using a studio light for this. This light is light, window light, studio light, you're going to have kind of the same effects. I'm showing you because it gives you a little bit more of an example to see. So with this picture, I'm taking this image just with the studio light. And this light source is really tiny. The light source is about the same size as the bowl itself, and it's pretty far away. So you're getting just a little bit of light on the subject. And that's why you're getting this big spot of glare here. In fact, when I first set up to take this picture, I was noticing I had a couple of spots of glare right here. And I realized that I had the lights on in the next room over, and that light was reflecting onto my subject from the next room. So I actually had to go in there and turn that light off. So if you're having trouble with glare, especially if any of you photograph curved objects, you get that a lot. So just using that direction of light to figure out if there's any you can turn off, but obviously leaving on the ones that you need. And you can see if you're photographing a person or something like this, you'll get this harsh shadow because that light source is so small. You'll get the same issue out in the bright sun, actually. The sun itself is huge, obviously, but it's so far away that it actually creates a harsh light because it is small. So if you're photographing outside, if you have a lot of outdoor product, and you're trying to get rid of shadows, or you've got some glare, like if you're getting that harsh shadow you don't want, you may need to change the time of day that you're coming out, morning or evening, like when that golden light's happening. It can be a beautiful time to take pictures outdoors. Or if you're at noon, the shadows are going to be kind of messy for you. You can also pull something into the shade, or cloudy days are actually great for photographing product, because cloud is like a big softener in the sky. It's going to soften things up for you. And we've had plenty of cloudy days recently, so you can probably find one. Another thing you can do is backlight. So if you're photographing outdoors, you could have the sun behind your subject. Now you have to know your camera a little bit to be able to get the correct exposure there, because it's going to want things to be darker. But you can put that light behind your subject. If you have a flash in your camera, you might want to use a little bit then. and you can get this really pretty glowy light. So back to the hard light. Any small light source is going to create hard light. It's going to create a glare and create this hard shadows. That's why it's called hard light, because you've got this really sharp shadow line. And my son was nice enough to be my model for this one. So that's a very hard light. Now I made the light a little bit softer by adding this umbrella. So this made the light source quite a bit larger. The bowl's over here behind my logo. So you're still getting some glare because the light source is a little bit larger. You still have some shadow transition, but that line here is quite a bit softer. So making this light source larger really helped out to make the light softer. And then one more step into that. This is really huge. So the bowl's still over here. This is like 6 by 4. All this is, this particular one is ripstop nylon, but you can have the same effect with a translucent shower curtain. So if you don't have to have a studio strobe to do this. You could put a shower curtain on the window if you wanted, and that would really soften up your light. The only trouble with that is you're blocking some light, so you're going to probably need to open up your shutter speed a little bit more to get that image to have that appropriate exposure. You'll also notice my flash is actually pointed away from this big scrim, and so this light falling on this bowl is really soft. The glare is pretty much gone because it's broadened out. And the light on my son there is really soft and beautiful, and he's obviously very cute. And the shadow transition, there is shadow there, and it's nice. It's barely noticeable. I actually use this setup quite a bit when I'm photographing people, when I'm doing professional headshots. So I can move this stand around wherever I want it and put the light wherever I want it. But if you're stuck with a window, I would definitely say move your product in as close to that window and scrim as possible. And this one light would just cause the light to wrap around the image, and you wouldn't have too many shadows. And it can really lead to some beautiful images if you get to understand your light. So any questions about lighting, about how hard light, soft light, how to make your light look better for your images, and how to get rid of glare and shadow lines?
Doesn't look like any questions at this time, Jen.
Hopefully I'm being either very thorough and not totally overwhelming everybody. Good. And you're always welcome to get in touch with me if you have questions later on. So for creative photographers, and that's, I think a lot of you said that's what you wanted to do, you want to look at compositional elements in your pictures as you're taking them. So the first thing you want to do is you want to simplify. You want to make sure you don't have trees growing out of people's heads, you don't have busy backgrounds. Also, if you have a background that's a little bit darker than your subject, if your subject is the brightest thing in the picture, that will really draw attention to it. You can also use things like leading lines and triangles to draw attention to your subject. And here I've got a picture. I know she's a person, not a product, but you've got the lines. Actually, this is over at Clarkson, so get that in there too. So the lines just lead you right toward her. So if you imagine you had a product here, then you can have those lines really helping to focus onto your product. You may also notice things like if you're out in a field and you're photographing farm stuff, you may have a fence line. Possibly putting your subject near the fence line and shooting down that line can give you a really good look to lead your eye into the picture. Another way to have the viewer's eye really led into the picture and to look around is to use this rule of thirds. What that means is that anything that's positioned at these points of the image will have higher impact. So if something's in the center, we see that a lot. It can be kind of boring. But if you just shift it over a little bit, even if you're just out in a big field and you have something at this corner, that will kind of draw a little bit more interest to the picture. And as Western, we read left to right. So a lot of times one of these two spots would be a good place to put your subject. You can experiment with this. Even if you're just doing something with jewelry, you could kind of have the necklace going here and have the pendant there to lead the line in. You can also look at leading lines as hands. Like you usually can follow, if you're taking a fashion picture and you have a necklace on someone, you could have a hand up by the necklace and use that line of the arm and hand to kind of point at the necklace so that follows the line up. Texture, color, and shape can be really important too. especially if you're doing smaller images. If you've got like a board with beautiful wood texture behind your necklace, or if you've got colors in your image, you want to try to make them be coordinating with whatever the picture that you're taking is. So you don't want to have something like bright red in the background when you've got mostly a green color, because that would really stand out. You want to kind of try to control for those. And like I said before, try different camera angles. You might be able to get something great if you just move down or move up or move around a little bit. So style and branding, that would be something that you want to, and this is kind of more of my small business development center hat, really defining your target customer before you even start to take your picture can make a big difference. So like if you know your target customer's kind of more Adirondacky, woodsy, outdoorsy type person, the sort of textures you want to include in your image, like you want to have woods and possibly like use Adirondack chairs, or if you're working with farmers, you might have like open fields and things that kind of attract that sort of customer. If you're going the other way, if your customer is more urban, like say you're selling like fancy tennis shoes or something, you might want to use more like metals and bricks and concretes and have kind of more sharp angles as part of your look. So thinking about your brand and how you want your images to look might influence both the backgrounds, the foregrounds, and the lighting style. If you're going for more of a soft female type look, you might have that more softer light. If you're looking kind of something hard masculine, you might have more 90-degree angles. You might have more shadows in the image. Might have a more darker feel to it. So that's something to really think about when you're building your brand as to what you want your images to look like, and include any elements in that image that attract that customer. If you need ideas, there's so many image searches out there. Google image search, check Pinterest, other local, national, worldwide competitors. If you've got somebody that's a national level brand doing a lot of the same stuff that you do, you can kind of see what their images look like, because they've have high-end research teams to figure it out too. And then change that. Obviously, you don't want to totally copy, but have something that really matches your brand and what you want, but can get ideas from elsewhere. And it's also a good idea to have the product on its own and have a person in it. The person, like say you're photographing jewelry, somebody could see how it looks when it's worn might be very different than how it looks when it's just on a table or on a stand. Or if you're photographing product, it can be good to have a person in it to lend interest, to see like if you're doing the big solar cells, or if you're out at Cornell, to see how large this situation is, or places, have a person in there to kind of draw some interest. Posing is where you might want to bring in more of a professional photographer. Learning how to pose people so that they look good and that your product looks good too is a bit of an art. It's definitely something you can learn, and some people are really naturally very good at it. Like I talked about hands earlier, using hands in the image to focus in on the product. Or if you're using 90-degree angles, that's more of a strong look, or softer S curves for people can be more of a soft look. Also, you can, when you're doing fashion photography, a lot of times you want to have the model looking away from the camera. Then that gives you, the eye of the viewer, time to really look at the clothing and look at the jewelry. Usually if the model's looking straight at the camera, you're looking more at the model. So there's just little bitty techniques that you can change. And I think it's really good to have people in your images so that can get a little more interest and be more creative. So any questions on the creative side and composition before we move on to equipment, which is always a lot of times what people ask me, what should I buy?
Any questions so far? Oh, you're being very thorough, Jen.
I guess so. Well, we may be done quicker than I was thinking. That'll work. So equipment, I tell people, I have a lot of new photographers and just people who want to shoot pictures ask me all the time, like, okay, what sort of camera should I get to take better pictures, or what things should I get? I always tell people, only buy new stuff when you feel like you're limited by what you have. There's phones out there that take great pictures. If you're doing fine with your phone, that's great. If it's not working for you, if you're trying to take things that are moving and you got that delay between when you hit the click to take the picture and when the picture actually takes, that point you might need to move up to an SLR. So level 1, starving artist, you don't have any money at all all you really need is a window and something smooth to use as a backdrop to do smaller photographs. Fabric can work, but you might end up with some wrinkles. So if you get a roll of paper or vinyl, they'll wrinkle less. If you need a large piece of vinyl, if you are doing larger products, check with Dave at Commercial Press. They can probably get you a piece from their stock. Or you can use something like my $10 table from IKEA. That works really well for doing small products too. And you'll need something to take the picture, whether it's a phone or a camera, whichever you want. I mentioned image editing software earlier. There are quite a few out there that are free. I've listed a few here. I haven't used any of them. I stick with Photoshop just because I use it professionally, and Photoshop's kind of the top brand out there right now, but there are others. So check into it. They can help you crop. They can help you brighten up an image, darken an image, even add more creative. There's so many different filters, like an Instagram you have that you can add to the image to just start giving a different look to it. So check into it, find ones you want. I think that would be something, if you're doing a lot of photography, you'll probably want to at least get one of the free image editing, just in case you need to crop in or it was crooked. It's easy to straighten out a picture with the image editing software. And I did mention at the beginning tripod. If you're doing small products, a tripod is probably one of the first things you'd want to get. If you need to print the pictures you're taking, then you might need to spend the money on a camera, because when you're printing, so when you're pushing stuff out online, it doesn't matter so much what the resolution is. Most phones and cameras will be okay with that. But if you're going to print, they need a higher resolution photo. I mean, they need a photo that's big. Most phones, although it's starting to change, probably will not take pictures large enough for a magazine or a print ad. So there's kind of the question of, do you see yourself really doing a lot of photography on your own? If you do, then possibly investing in the camera so that you can do it yourself. Or if you are thinking, I just need a few of these shots for a magazine ad, that might be a time to bring in a professional photographer. Also, if you think you're going to need editing done on the final images and you don't want to learn how to use the editing software yourself, that might be a time to bring in a professional too. So like I said, if you only need the photographs for your website and Facebook, then you're probably fine with your phone. In that case, you might want to invest in some lighting. If you're only restricted to window light, you're kind of stuck with, like, if it's too dark outside, or if it's actually sometimes too bright outside, you might have light just beaming in that window. That might be a little bit too much for you. So investing in lighting can be a good step too. So we did have a couple questions, I think. So, Brooke, did we get some couple in there?
Yes, there's a question. This person said they have a small light box set up to do jewelry photography,
Mm-hmm.
and they like to put it on stone on a black background, but always end up with lint or something popping up on the black
Oh, yeah.
background. And they've tried different materials, linen, paper, velvet, without much luck. And they just noted that they use their photos mostly for Facebook and website Instagram. So do you have any suggestions when you're using a dark background of how to get rid of those details that you might not want?
Yes. So, dark backgrounds, they can be difficult. Like I said, I use velvet, so sometimes you get that little velvet popping out. When I mentioned before that the light to the side creates texture, the light to the side is also going to bring out those textural details in the background. So you may want to try moving your light to more of a 45-degree angle and seeing if that helps. The other thing to think about would be possibly getting some image editing software, because in that software, you can darken the blacks some. So if it's something that is just a little bit brighter than everything around it, you could just darken down the blacks to bring your back to full black. Another thing those image editing software you can do is a lot of them have kind of one-click editing, where if you have something on there, you can click on it and it'll automatically delete it for you. And the third option might be, I mentioned the gobo earlier. You could put up something between the light and your product, and so the light would only shine on your product and not shine on the backdrop. That will help the backdrop get darker. Also, you could probably move the product, depending on how you're set up, you may be able to move the product away from your backdrop. So if you pull that product out maybe 3 or 4 feet and you have the backdrop 3 or 4 feet back, that backdrop's not going to get as much light on it and it'll blur out too. So that might be a possibility as well. Also, lint brush, I ended up having to iron a backdrop the other day too. So I've definitely been there with wrinkles and with stuff on your backdrops. It happens. That's I tend to try to make the backdrop darker using my lighting, and then Photoshop whatever else I need to for that kind of situation. Any other questions?
Yes. Thank you for your suggestions on that. Another question, what resolution is needed for a small magazine print ad? So if you're creating a 4:6 ad, for example, what is a good resolution for something like that?
Well, you may want to check with who you're doing the ad through. They probably can tell you. You'll want to have something, they go in what's called DPI, dots per inch. So you'll want to have the camera be able to get up to 300 DPI. So the image would be, you probably want to have like an 8x10 image at 300 DPI, if that makes sense. So I'd say for a print ad, for a 4:6, you might be okay with a nice phone, but you're getting toward the point where you might need a camera to be able to take that large of an image. So if you pull the image out of your camera or your phone, however you're taking it, and look at the properties and see how wide it is. For Facebook, I usually want something that's at least 2,000 pixels wide or tall. Well, the longest side of it is 2,000 pixels. And that's a good resolution for Facebook and web. You'll probably want to get up to 4,000 pixels for print or higher if you can. The way you find that out is if you right click on the image and go down to properties, it'll tell you how big it is in pixels. If they're still saying you think it's big enough and they're saying it's too small, you might need to use image editing software to enlarge it, which is a possibility. So that's Photoshop you can enlarge something with, probably the other image editing software you can enlarge it too.
Great. A comment from Annie at the Potsdam Public Library. She notes that the library will have lighting and drops available in the fall through the St.
Oh,
Lawrence Arts Council.
that's
So if you
exciting.
don't have your own equipment, you'll be able to um, use the equipment from the library.
Actually,
Great
Annie, we could
resource.
talk about if you want me to come out and do a class using that. That could be a possibility. That could be good.
Great idea.
We'll talk about that.
Any other questions? Did you have more slides, Jen? I know we
Yes, a
got
couple more.
into. Okay, we'll get back to you then.
So yeah, we covered that one. Tripod I mentioned. If you're the first thing you're buying, I'd say go with a tripod unless you're out in nature or moving around a lot. You're not going to need one, but most product photographers will need a tripod at some point. I mentioned editing software. That's going to be pretty key because that'll help you with all those dots on your background and stuff. If you want something to make the source of your light larger, if you're trying for that softer light, you can get a scrim. It's officially called a scrim. That's ripstop nylon, which I showed you, or a translucent shower curtain will work. And you can wrap it over PVC pipe and move it around wherever you want to. There's something out there called a light tent. I will get into that. It looked like there weren't too many people on the webinar today who did a lot of product photography for eBay, where you would need that kind of light tent, but I will show you what it looks like in case it could be helpful. That would be really helpful if you don't want to set up a room in your house and be moving stuff around. You can just pop one of those up and down. So those can help. Oh, yeah, there's the light tents. So the traditional kind of light tents are this one here, where the light shines in through these outside edges, and then you've got this backdrop in here with your product on it. But a lot of newer light tents are moving to this LED look. So this is lit with all these LED panels on the insides. I don't have one. Most of the product photography I do is real estate, and that would be a very huge light tent to put a house in. But I have talked to other photographers who have one and say it works out pretty well. I did read the reviews on it. They say you sometimes do get glare on your product just because of the light all bouncing off. So if you're having trouble with glare, you might need to do something a little beyond the light tent. But these are pretty easy to set up and can really help you if you're trying to take a lot of pictures with a product that's small enough to fit in there. And everything's also moving toward LED as opposed to your regular tungsten light bulb. The only thing you want to be careful with LED lights, if you get the cheaper ones, they can sometimes have a purple tint or a green tint to them, which is you can fix afterwards in Photoshop. But if you don't have Photoshop or image editing or don't want to edit, you might need to go for a slightly more expensive one. Just read the reviews, make sure that it's one that's balanced well. So buying stuff the right way, definitely, like I said, read reviews before buying. I've got some links up there. I usually look, there's a couple professional photographer sites like bhphotovideo.com. Um, Adorama.com is for photographers too. Then the reviews on there, will most likely be by high level amateurs or professional photographers. It's definitely okay to buy stuff off Amazon, but you want to be careful about reviews. I wish we had a camera shop in the area. Brooke will have to work on that at some point. So I do like to look at items in person before I buy. If you know somebody around here that has an item you're buying used, that's great. Or I tend to go to Ottawa more than I travel to like Watertown, Syracuse area, so I check out Henry's in Ottawa. And then there are a couple camera stores in Burlington and Syracuse. I definitely love to support my local camera stores, so whenever I'm out, I like to check things and be hands-on. So, okay, so what if you like had tons of money, which we all wish we had, and could buy anything you wanted? So SLR camera, one of the reasons to buy an SLR is so that you can change lenses. So you can have different looks to your pictures. You would only need a really expensive SLR if you needed very large prints for high-end magazines. I'm thinking probably all the local stuff, you're not going to need a huge, super expensive SLR for that. Or if you need to photograph in the dark with no flashes, like I do a lot of weddings, and in churches I can't use a flash, so I have to have that higher level camera that can deal with taking pictures in the dark. Lighting, there's something called strobe lighting, which means that that's the kind of light that flashes at you. Or continuous lighting, that's like your LED panels that are on all the time. The less expensive line of strobe lighting that I like to use is Pulse C Buff. They're out of Nashville, which is where I'm from, so I like supporting them too. Their higher end products, more expensive, are Westcott, Profoto. Photix has an Indra light. So just be careful when you're reading reviews. Sometimes cheaper stuff is cheaper for a reason. So you want to get, if you're going to go for some lighting, it might be worth going for some slightly more expensive because you know it's going to work for you and not, explode. So that's not good either. If you're photographing small products like jewelry, a macro lens can be useful. I can show you some pictures I got with my macro. Macro, or for Canon, is called micro, basically zooms in on the product so it can make it larger than life. It can really make it pop. For medium products, a 50 millimeter lens is a good size, 50 or 35 millimeter. There's something called prime lenses. They don't zoom back and forth, but they have really great image clarity for the price of the lens. So you can get a 50 millimeter that doesn't zoom for quite a bit cheaper than a zoom lens, but you'll have really great image sharpness with that, even though it's cheaper. For large items, you'll definitely need a wide angle lens, especially if you're doing house photography. Just with a wide angle lens, you do get that distortion in there, so be aware of that. So when to hire a professional? If you don't really have time to do it yourself, and I, as a small business owner, and you guys too know, it's that time versus money. Like there's never enough time, and there's also never enough money. So you kind of got to pick. If you really want to do photography and want to learn more about it, great. Go ahead and jump in with your own equipment. But if it's rather something you'd outsource, like I outsource my accounting, like just bring in somebody occasionally to do some shots for you to up your Facebook page, and then keep those photographs and use them over time. If you need a really high resolution image for printing and your camera or your phone is not able to get there, that might be a time to bring in a photographer. Or if you're working with people and need to pose them, I mentioned earlier, that's sometimes to bring in a professional too. Particularly real estate interiors. If you're taking pictures indoors of real estate, it's hard to do that if you don't know how to use strobe lighting. So that might be a good time to bring in a professional to be able to do that well. Or if you want to photograph small objects up close. These are from a friend of mine, Chris Roselle at Chrysalis Design, so you can check her out. These over here were taken with that window light setup I showed you earlier. This was my IKEA table, the windows over here, and the main difference is I'm using my macro lens, so I'm able to get really close and see those images. So that might be a time to bring someone in if you need some better images. So how can I help? Like I mentioned before, I do one-on-one classes. I end up setting something up at the Potsdam Library soon. So I can come and teach you how to photograph with your own equipment and everything you need. It's $75 per hour for those classes, plus travel if I have to go far, usually like outside of the county area. Or I could photograph a group of your products if you wanted to start an Etsy store or to have high-end photographs. I have a studio here in Canton, or I can go on location and do this. I can also help you with your composition design. And putting on my Small Business Development Center hat for a little while. If you need help figuring out what to do with your photographs once you take them, definitely come see us. Website development, social media, marketing plans. We've got Renee at our center who some of you might have met, who's specifically working with businesses and can help you develop a website and help you get your Facebook page going, Instagram, really whatever you guys need. So you can call us at that number, or you can reach me at my business contact information, which is right here. So McCluskeyphotography.net, same Gmail, or my phone is right there. So any follow-up questions? I think we got a few minutes to go.
Any last questions for Jen now that she's covered as much as she can in this period of time? If there are any other questions, speak now. It's really great comprehensive information, a lot of tips I think we can all take away no matter what we're photographing or what equipment we have. So it's nice to know that there are options for all of us, and certainly a picture tells 1,000 words, so it's very important for sure. All right, if there are no other questions, Laura can bring up that survey or our feedback form. And if you all will take a minute to just click that on the left-hand side in the link box and complete the feedback form, we'd appreciate that. It's just a few questions, and certainly let us know if there are topics that you're interested in. We look at that list, and then I go out and recruit presenters. Likewise, if you have something you think would be beneficial to people, and we've had all kinds of topics you can check out on slcchamber.org. We're happy to share that. We try to really focus the presentation so that we can get into some detail within a quick hour. And you can always watch the recordings to review, refresh, or share with others as well. We hold these webinars the first Wednesday of every month, so you can block out your calendar and plan to keep an eye and register for those. We do take off January and July because the holidays usually butt up to that first Wednesday. And so we will not have a webinar in July, but we'll be back in August, and I'm working on confirming that presentation right now. And in September, we will have a presentation on constant contact. So for those of you who utilize that email marketing tool, that will be a handy webinar as well. And like I said, I'm always looking for presenters and for topics. We have among our almost 500 members, we have a lot of people with a lot of experience, and love the opportunity to share that information with all of you. So again, please click that feedback form. You can also, where it says join the chamber, that will take you to the landing page that has the archive for the recordings as well. And we hope to see you all in August. And Laura's just reminding me that in August we're not going to do the first Wednesday due to scheduling for us. So August will actually be the second Wednesday of the month. So you can mark that. But otherwise we do try to stick to the first Wednesday. So it will be August 9th, noon to 1, as usual. Thank you again. We hope to see you soon. Enjoy this beautiful sunny day that we have finally. Have a great afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Laura and Clarkson University, and we thank St. Lawrence for their sponsorship, and thank Jennifer McCluskey for all of this wonderful information that she's shared. Certainly be in touch with her if you need any more assistance. Have a great afternoon, everyone.
Yep. Oh. So it looks like Jennifer hopped off. Put everybody on hold, and I think Jennifer hopped off.
Okay. She may have had to get back to work too. I think she went home to do it. So.
Okay.
Very good.
Okay. Good one. Oh, actually, let me stop. Now we have to cut this off.